In the summer of 1964, a 9-year-old boy in rural Ohio walked out of his mother's kitchen at 7 in the morning with a jelly sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a pocket knife his grandfather had given him for his 7th birthday, and 3 dimes for the soda fountain. His mother did not ask where he was going. She did not need to. He came home when the streetlights came on, sunburned, scratched, smelling of creek water and gasoline, with a frog in a coffee can and a story about a copperhead he had killed with a stick behind the railroad bridge. His mother washed his hands at the sink, set a plate of supper in front of him, and asked him to pass the salt. That was it. That was a childhood. Today, the same boy doing the same things would not make it past the end of his own driveway before a neighbor was on the phone and a county worker was at the door. What follows are 25 ordinary, daily, unremarkable things that American parents let their children do in the 1960s, things nobody thought twice about, things a working father in the Carolinas or a coal miner's wife in West Virginia would have been confused to be questioned about, that today would bring a police cruiser to the curb and a clipboard to the kitchen table. This channel exists for one simple reason: to remember how American families lived, how they raised their children, how they kept their homes, and how they held each other together before all of it was lost. If you believe these traditions are worth preserving, take a moment and subscribe. It costs nothing. It tells this channel that someone out there still cares whether these stories get told before the last people who lived them are gone. The viewers who subscribe are the reason these stories keep getting made. There is nothing else holding them up. Number 25. Walking to school alone at 5 years old in the dark. In the small towns of the 1960s, a 5-year-old in Nebraska or rural Alabama or upstate New York pulled on a coat in the gray light of a winter morning, picked up a tin lunch pail with a thermos of milk, and walked, sometimes a mile, sometimes 2, down a county road with no sidewalk, past barking dogs, past men in trucks who waved, past the gas station where the old attendant nodded to them every morning. There was no parent walking behind them. There was no parent watching from a window. There was no phone call to the school to confirm arrival. A mother in Missouri stood at her sink, washed the breakfast dishes, and trusted that the town would carry her child the rest of the way. And it did, because the town knew her child. The mailman knew. The grocer knew. The 2 old widows on Elm Street watched from their porches and would have known within an hour if the child had not passed. That was the safety, not locks, not cameras, not tracking devices. The eyes of neighbors who had nothing better to do than see who walked by. Today, a parent who lets a 5-year-old walk to school alone is reported, investigated, sometimes arrested. The same act that was considered ordinary diligence is now considered abandonment. Number 20. Riding in the back of a pickup truck, a working father in rural Tennessee would load 4 or 5 children into the open bed of a Ford pickup on a Saturday morning, drive them down to the feed store, the hardware store, the swimming hole, and back. The children sat with their backs against the cab, legs stretched out, the wind in their faces, watching the road unspool behind them. Nobody wore a seatbelt because there were no seatbelts. Nobody wore a helmet. Nobody was strapped to anything. They held on with their hands, or they held on to each other, and they laughed because the wind was loud and the day was theirs. A grandmother in the Ozarks could fit 7 grandchildren in the bed of her old Chevrolet and take them to the church picnic and bring them home tired and happy at sundown. No one stopped her. No one would have dreamed of stopping her. Today, a single child standing in the bed of a moving pickup will get the driver pulled over, ticketed, and in some states charged with child endangerment. Number 23. Drinking from the garden hose. The water from the hose was not cold. Exactly. It was warm at first, plastic tasting, hot from the sun, and you let it run until it turned cool. Then you put your mouth on the brass nozzle, and you drank. A child in Pennsylvania, sweating from running through a sprinkler in July, drank from the hose 6 or 8 times a day all summer long. So did every other child in every other yard on the block. Nobody had a water bottle. Nobody had bottled water. The idea that water needed to be sold in a plastic bottle to be safe would have been laughed at by every grandmother on the street. Today, mothers are warned by parenting websites that hose water contains lead, bacteria, and chemicals from the rubber. The implication is that to let your child drink from a hose is to poison them. The generation that drank from the hose lived to be 80. The generation that drinks only filtered water from sealed plastic is the most anxious generation in American history. Make of that what you will. Number 22. Playing with fire. A boy of 8 or 9 in West Virginia was given a box of kitchen matches by his father and shown how to start a burn pile in the backyard. Leaves, branches, old newspaper. The boy stood with a rake and watched the fire until it burned down to nothing. Then he stirred the ashes and went inside for supper. He had been taught how. He had been trusted to do it. And he did it well because a boy who is trusted with fire learns to respect it. Girls in Wisconsin lit the candles on the supper table every night by the time they were 6. Children in rural Alabama tended the wood stove in the kitchen on winter mornings, feeding it splits of oak before their mother was even out of bed. Today, a parent who hands a child a box of matches is reported. The same child who would have grown up competent and steady is instead told that fire is dangerous. That fire is for adults. That fire is something to be afraid of. The child grows up. The child cannot light a stove. The child cannot start a campfire. The child cannot do the one thing that every human being for 10,000 years has known how to do. Number 21. Carrying a pocket knife to school. Every boy in rural Missouri in 1962 had a pocket knife in his pocket on the first day of school. So did most of the girls. A small folding blade with a wooden handle, often a hand-me-down from a grandfather, sometimes engraved with initials. The knife was used to sharpen a pencil, to whittle a stick at recess, to cut an apple in half and share it with a friend at lunch. The teacher knew every child had a knife. The teacher had a knife. The principal had a knife. Nobody was afraid. Nobody was harmed. The knife was a tool, and a child who carried a tool learned to be a person who could use one. Today, a 7-year-old who brings a butter knife to school in a lunchbox is suspended, sometimes expelled, sometimes reported to the police. The same object that was once a rite of passage is now treated as a weapon, and the children who would have learned to use it well never learn anything at all. Number 20. Spending the day at the creek with no adult. A group of 6 or 7 children, ages 5 to 12, walked down to the creek behind the cornfield in southern Indiana on a Saturday in June and stayed there until supper. They built dams. They caught crawdads in coffee cans. They swung from a rope tied to a sycamore branch and dropped into the deep pool where the water turned green. The oldest child was 11. There was no adult within half a mile. There was no phone. There was no way to call for help if something went wrong. And nothing went wrong because the older children watched the younger ones, and the younger ones did what they were told, and the creek was not a danger to be feared but a place to be known. Today, the same group of children doing the same thing would result in 7 separate calls to Child Protective Services and the eventual removal of all the children from their homes. Pending investigation, the creek would still be there. Nobody would be in it. Number 19. Sitting in the front seat of the car at 3 years old. A young mother in Cincinnati ran her 3-year-old daughter to the grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon. The child sat in the front seat next to her. No car seat, no booster, no seatbelt. The mother drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand resting on the child's knee, the way her own mother had driven with her 30 years before. They went to the A&P, they bought a pound of ground beef and a head of cabbage and a quart of milk, and they came home. The child remembered that drive for the rest of her life, the smell of her mother's perfume, the feel of the vinyl seat in summer, the radio playing a song she would hum to her own children someday. Today, the same drive would end with a state trooper at the window and a charge of child endangerment on the mother's record. The child seat is safer. Nobody is arguing otherwise. But the closeness of that front seat, the casual physical presence of a mother and a child sharing the same small space, that has been engineered out of childhood, and nothing has replaced it. The food industry, the safety industry, the parenting industry, none of these existed in any real form before the 1970s. There was no market for telling a mother in Missouri that her instincts were wrong. There was no money in convincing a father in West Virginia that he did not know how to raise his own son. Then somebody figured out that fear sells better than anything else on earth. Fear of germs, fear of strangers, fear of food, fear of fire, fear of water, fear of the front seat, fear of the back of a pickup truck. Every fear came with a product attached: a car seat, a helmet, a monitor, a tracking device, a bottle of water, a class to teach you what your grandmother already knew. The children of the 1960s grew up with none of these things, and most of them turned out fine. The children of today grow up surrounded by every protection ever invented, and they are the most anxious, the most medicated, the most afraid generation this country has ever produced. Something was traded away. The trade was not a good one. Number 18. Eating sugar by the spoonful. A grandmother in rural Georgia kept a glass jar of sugar on the kitchen table with a long-handled spoon stuck into it. When the grandchildren came over after school, they each got a spoonful, just a spoonful. Sometimes on a slice of buttered bread, sometimes straight from the spoon. It was a small ceremony. It cost almost nothing. It made the children feel known. There was no concept of added sugars. There were no warnings on labels. There were no nutritionists writing books about how this was killing them. The children ate the sugar, drank a glass of milk, and went outside to run for 3 hours. They burned every calorie before supper. They were lean and strong. Today, the same grandmother would be reported by a school nurse for giving her grandchildren refined sugar, and the children would be sent home with a pamphlet about childhood obesity. The grandmother and her sugar spoon are gone. The children are heavier than ever. Number 17. Being whipped with a switch. A boy in eastern Kentucky who sassed his mother was sent out to the yard to cut his own switch from the willow tree by the fence. He cut it too thin, and his mother sent him back to cut a thicker one. He came back. She whipped his bare legs 3 or 4 times. He cried. He apologized. He went to bed without supper, and by morning the matter was closed. He did not sass his mother again. He grew up to be a man who knew how to control his temper, because he had learned in a way that left no doubt that there were lines you did not cross. The whipping was not cruelty. It was correction. It was rare. It was followed by a hug and a piece of cornbread at breakfast and a mother's hand on the back of his neck. Today, the same mother would lose her children. The same boy, uncorrected, grows up not knowing where the line is, and the world will teach him much later and much more harshly what his mother might have taught him in 2 minutes with a willow switch. That is not an argument for the switch. It is an argument for the certainty that came with it. A child who knew the rules was a child who could breathe. Number 16. Smoking cigarettes at 15. A boy in Pittsburgh in 1965 walked into the corner store with a quarter and bought a pack of Lucky Strikes for his father. He was 12 years old. The man behind the counter knew the family, knew the father smoked Luckies, and handed the pack across without a word. By 15, the boy was smoking himself. So were most of the boys at his school. So were some of the girls. The teachers smoked in the teacher's lounge. The doctors smoked in the hospital. The mothers smoked at the kitchen table with their coffee. Nobody knew yet what it would do to them. Many of them died of it 50 years later, and that is not a small thing. But the freedom of that 15-year-old to walk into the store and be treated as a person who could be trusted with a transaction that is gone too, and not just for cigarettes. A 15-year-old today cannot buy a glue stick at some pharmacies without showing identification. The world has decided that no one under 18 can be trusted with anything. And the boys and girls who grow up under that decision arrive at 20, not knowing how to be trusted with anything either. Number 15. Babysitting younger siblings at 10 years old. A girl in rural North Carolina was 10 years old when her mother went to the hospital to deliver the 5th child. The girl stayed home with her 3 younger brothers and sisters, the oldest of whom was 7 and the youngest of whom was 2. She made them grilled cheese sandwiches for supper. She gave the 2-year-old a bath in the kitchen sink. She put them all to bed. She locked the back door and the front door and sat up reading a library book until her father came home at 10 o'clock. She did this for 3 days. She was paid in pride. Her mother came home with the new baby and thanked her, and that was all. Today, that same girl would be the subject of a child welfare investigation, and her parents would be charged with leaving a minor unsupervised. The competence she developed in those 3 days, the calm, the responsibility, the quiet certainty that she could handle a hard thing, is a competence the children of today are not allowed to develop, because they are not allowed to be alone with anything difficult. Number 14. Walking to the public library and staying until dark. A boy in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1968, walked 12 blocks to the public library every Saturday morning. He stayed all day. He read westerns and adventure stories and books about the Civil War. He ate the sandwich his mother had packed him at noon, sitting on the front steps of the library. He walked home at 6 o'clock when the building closed. He was 9 years old. His mother did not call to check on him because there was no phone in the library and no phone in her purse. She trusted the librarian. She trusted the streets between her house and the library. She trusted her son. Today, a 9-year-old alone in a public library for 8 hours would be reported by a concerned adult within the first hour, and the police would call his mother to come and get him. The boy who became a reader because he was given a building full of books and a whole day to wander it, that boy does not exist anymore. The library is still there. The children are not. If any of this is bringing up a memory, something your mother let you do, something your grandfather taught you, something you did at 9 years old that no child today would be allowed to do, leave it in the comments where you grew up, what year it was, what you did that would scandalize a modern parent. This channel reads every one of them. There is something quiet and good about seeing how widespread these childhoods used to be. How many of us were raised this way? How many of us still remember? The comments under these videos are becoming a kind of archive, a place where the stories that are not in any book get written down by the people who lived them. Add yours. Number 13. Building a treehouse with real tools. A boy of 11 in rural Vermont built a treehouse in a maple tree behind his father's barn using a hammer, a handsaw, a box of 10-penny nails, and lumber scavenged from a torn-down chicken coop. His father showed him how to hold the hammer, how to start the nail, how to drive it home in 3 strokes. Then his father went back to his own work and left the boy to it. The treehouse took 6 weeks. It was crooked. It leaked in the rain. It had a rope ladder the boy had spliced himself. And the boy, at 11 years old, had built a structure with his own 2 hands that he could stand on and survey his small kingdom from. He learned more in those 6 weeks than he learned in any school year. Today, the same boy would be enrolled in a supervised carpentry class at the community center, where he would build a birdhouse from a pre-cut kit in 2 hours under the eye of an instructor with a clipboard. The treehouse is not in the curriculum. The kingdom is not on offer. Number 12. Eating food that fell on the floor. A toddler in Indianapolis dropped a piece of buttered bread on the kitchen floor. Her grandmother picked it up, blew on it, brushed it off, and handed it back to her. The child ate it. The grandmother did not think about it again. There was no 5-second rule because the floor was clean and the bread was bread and the child was hungry. The germ theory of disease was understood, but it was not yet weaponized into a daily anxiety. Children ate dirt sometimes. Children licked their fingers and the railing on the porch and the side of the watering trough. Children built up the immune systems they would carry for the next 80 years. Today, mothers in clean houses sterilize pacifiers that fall on clean floors, and their children grow up with the highest rates of allergies and asthma in human history. The connection has been made by every honest scientist who has looked at it. The grandmothers were right. The germ has been turned into a monster that does not actually exist. Number 11. Hitchhiking to the next town. A high school junior in rural Oregon stuck out his thumb at the edge of his small town on a Saturday morning and was picked up within 10 minutes by a man in a logging truck who took him 40 miles to the next town to see a girl he liked. The girl's father gave him a ride to the bus station that night, and he rode the bus halfway home and then hitched the rest of the way and was in his own kitchen by midnight, having a glass of milk before bed. His mother had known he was going. His mother had not been worried. Hitchhiking was not safe in the sense that nothing could ever go wrong, but it was not the unthinkable horror it has been turned into. Men picked up boys. Women picked up girls. Truckers picked up anyone with a clean shirt. There was a kind of public trust, an unspoken agreement that a stranger in trouble was a person you helped. That trust is gone. Whether it was killed by a few well-publicized crimes or by the steady drumbeat of fear that came in with the evening news, it does not much matter. The hitchhiker is gone. The driver who would have stopped is gone. Both sides of that small American ritual have been erased. Number 10. Working a real job at 12. A boy in West Virginia in 1961 took a paper route at 12 years old. He got up at 4:30 every morning, loaded a canvas bag with 80 newspapers, and rode his bicycle 6 miles before dawn, every day, including Sunday, for 2 years. He kept the money in a coffee can under his bed. By 14, he had saved enough to buy a used motorcycle. By 16, he had paid for his own school clothes for 2 years running. His parents took none of the money. The money was his, and the work was his, and the lesson was his. He learned that a man who has worked since he was 12 does not feel poor even when he has very little, because he knows the inside of his own competence. Today, the paper route does not exist. There are no jobs for 12-year-olds. Child labor laws passed for the very good reason of keeping 10-year-olds out of textile mills have been extended to forbid the kind of small, real work that used to grow a boy into a man. The teenager today, with no work history and no money of his own and no sense of his own usefulness, arrives at 22 with a college degree and the unshakable conviction that he cannot do anything. He is not wrong. Nobody ever let him try. Number 9. Wandering through the woods unsupervised. A group of children in rural Maine in 1966 left the house after breakfast and walked into the pine woods behind the farm. They were gone for 9 hours. They built a lean-to from fallen branches. They cooked hot dogs over a fire. One of them had started with a single match. They identified the prints of a deer and the scat of a fox. They came home filthy and hungry and full of stories. Their mother did not know exactly where they had been, only the general direction, and she trusted the woods to give them back. The woods always did. Today, the same children would be the subject of a search party within 2 hours, and their mother would be on the local news as a person of interest. The woods are still full of deer and fox and pine. They are also empty of children, and there is no good word for what that means. Number 8. Drinking coffee at 8 years old. A grandmother in southern Louisiana poured a small cup of coffee with milk and 3 teaspoons of sugar for her 8-year-old granddaughter every morning at the breakfast table. The two of them sat across from each other in the gray morning light, drinking coffee and eating biscuits with cane syrup, and they talked. Or they did not talk. Either way, they were together. The child grew up to be a woman who drank coffee with her own granddaughter 60 years later. The coffee was not the point. The ritual was the point. The small adult cup, the saucer, the spoon, the slow morning hour with a person who loved her. These were the things being passed down. Today, a grandmother who pours coffee for an 8-year-old will be told by a pediatrician, by a parenting magazine, by a school counselor that she is harming the child's developing brain. The child will be given a juice box instead. The grandmother will be moved out of the morning. The slow hour of the breakfast table will be replaced with 20 minutes of cartoons. Something has been lost that is not measured in milligrams of caffeine. These were not just rules. They were not just permissions. They were the small daily proofs that a child belonged to a world larger than themselves, a world of trust, of competence, of usefulness, of being known. The freedom to walk to the library was also the freedom to be the kind of person who could walk to the library. The trust to start a fire was also the trust to be the kind of person who could be trusted. When a society stops giving its children these things, it does not get safer children. It gets smaller children, smaller in soul, smaller in capacity, smaller in the part of them that knows what they can do. The protection that has been wrapped around the modern child is, in many cases, a cage made out of love. The cage is comfortable. The cage is well padded. The cage has Wi-Fi and a screen and 1,000 entertainments. But the door has been welded shut, and the child inside has never seen the woods. Number 7. Going to the doctor alone. A girl of 14 in rural Tennessee had a sore throat one Tuesday in October of 1967. She walked 4 blocks to the office of the country doctor, sat in the waiting room with a magazine, was called in by the nurse, was examined by the doctor, was given a prescription, and walked home. Her mother was at work at the dress factory. Her mother had given her $1 for the visit and another $1 for the medicine at the drugstore. The doctor did not require a parent in the room. The drugstore did not require a parent's signature. The girl was treated as a person who could handle her own small medical business, and she did. Today, no doctor in America will see a 14-year-old without a parent present, and the bill will run to several $100s, and the mother will miss a half day of work, and the girl will learn that her body is something other people are in charge of. The competence of the small medical errand has been taken from her, and she will not get it back. Number 6. Riding a bicycle without a helmet for 10 years straight. Every child in every neighborhood in America from the 1950s through the 1980s rode a bicycle without a helmet. Boys and girls, city and country. They rode to school. They rode to friends' houses. They rode to the swimming pool. They rode to the candy store. They rode no-handed. They rode with one foot on the seat. They rode standing up on the pedals. They rode down hills so steep their hair flew straight back. Some of them fell. Most of them did not. A few of them got hurt, and a very small few of them got badly hurt. And the rest of them grew up to be adults who had a relationship with a bicycle that today's children will never have. A bicycle was freedom on 2 wheels. It was the first independent vehicle of childhood. It was the first thing that took you somewhere your parents had not driven you. Today, the bicycle is a leisure object, used for an hour on a Saturday under parental supervision with a helmet, with knee pads, with reflective gear on a designated bike path. The freedom is gone. What is left is exercise. Number 5. being yelled at by other people's parents. A boy of 10 in suburban St. Louis tracked mud across Mrs. Hannigan's clean porch in 1963, and Mrs. Hannigan came out and yelled at him. She told him to take off his shoes the next time he came up her steps, and she told him to tell his mother she said hello. The boy went home, told his mother, and was yelled at a second time. Then he was sent over with a wet rag to clean Mrs. Hannigan's porch. He did it. Mrs. Hannigan gave him a cookie when he was done. The whole transaction took 45 minutes and produced a child who understood that the adults of his neighborhood were one extended authority, all of them his elders, all of them entitled to correct him. Today, a Mrs. Hannigan who yelled at a stranger's child would be reported to the homeowners association, possibly to the police, and certainly to the boy's parents, who would then defend their son and inform Mrs. Hannigan that she had no right to speak to their child. The village has been disassembled, and the parents who took it apart are the ones now wondering why nobody helps them raise their kids. Number 4. Eating food made from animals their family killed. A boy of 9 in the Ozarks in 1964 helped his father skin a deer that had been shot that morning. He held the rope, he watched the knife. He carried the heart and the liver into the kitchen in a porcelain bowl where his mother had a frying pan ready with butter and onions. They ate the liver for supper that night, with mashed potatoes and a glass of buttermilk. The boy knew where the meat came from. He had seen it walk. He had seen it die. He had felt the weight of it on the rope. He grew up to be a man who did not waste food, because he had learned in a way that no documentary could teach him what a piece of meat actually was. Today, the same boy would be in trauma counseling for what he had witnessed. The connection between a hunting father and a cooking mother and an eating son has been broken, and the meat in the grocery store now arrives in a plastic tray with no memory of an animal at all. The disconnection has consequences. None of them are good. Number 3. Disappearing for an entire weekend. At 12 years old, a boy of 12 in rural Pennsylvania packed a knapsack on a Friday afternoon in July of 1965 with a wool blanket, a fishing pole, a box of matches, a tin cup, 2 boiled potatoes, and a hunting knife. He walked out of his mother's kitchen at 3 in the afternoon and did not come back until Sunday night. He camped by a creek 6 miles from his house. He caught his own supper both nights. He slept under the stars. He came home Sunday at dusk, sunburned and bug-bitten, and changed, and his mother set a plate in front of him at the supper table and asked him to wash his hands. She did not ask him where he had been because she already knew the general direction, and she did not need to know the specifics. The boy at 12 had learned that he could survive in the woods for 2 days with what he could carry. He carried that knowledge for the rest of his life. He was never afraid of being alone again because he had been alone and it had been beautiful. Today, the 12-year-old who tries the same thing is the subject of a missing person alert and a multi-county search, and his mother loses her children. The world is no more dangerous than it was. The willingness to let a child meet that world has simply collapsed. Number 2, going to a stranger's house to play. A girl of 7 in a small town in Iowa in 1962 made a new friend at school on a Tuesday afternoon and was invited to that friend's house to play. She had never met the friend's mother. Her own mother had never met the friend's mother. The girl walked the 6 blocks to the friend's house with her new friend, was offered cookies by a woman she had never seen before, played in the basement until 5 o'clock, and walked home in time for supper. Her mother asked her how the afternoon had been. The mother did not call the friend's mother. The mother did not ask for a phone number. The mother trusted that small-town America was a network of basically decent women who looked after each other's children, and she was right. Today, no mother will let a 7-year-old go to a house she has not personally inspected. Background checks are run on the parents of birthday party hosts. Playdates are scheduled 3 weeks in advance with both mothers present. The casual play of an afternoon, the spontaneous friendship, the unscheduled 3 hours in a basement with a girl you just met has been engineered out of childhood. The cost of this engineering will not be fully known for another generation, but the children who never made a spontaneous friend in the basement of a stranger's house will grow up to be adults who do not know how friendships start. And finally, number 1, being trusted fundamentally to be a person. This is the one that contains all the others. In 1964, a child in America was treated as a small, capable, developing person, someone who could be given a task and trusted to complete it. someone who could be given freedom and trusted to come home, someone who could be given a tool and trusted to use it well. The child made mistakes. The child got hurt sometimes. The child was occasionally scared, and occasionally hungry, and occasionally lost. And out of those small, survivable hardships, the child built a self that knew its own edges, a self that knew the world, a self that could be relied on at 18 to leave home and stand up. Today, a child in America is treated as a fragile object, a thing to be protected, a thing to be monitored, a thing to be tracked and scheduled and supplemented and assessed. The child is wrapped in foam from the moment of birth. The child never feels the edge of anything sharp enough to teach, and the child arrives at 23 with a college degree and a phone full of apps. Unable to live alone, unable to cook a meal, unable to handle a difficult conversation, unable to bear the weight of a hard day. The protection has failed. The protection was never really about the child. It was about the parent's terror of being judged. And the child has paid the price for that terror. In the only currency a child has, the currency of becoming a whole person or not. A grandmother in West Virginia, 60 years ago, raised 5 children on a railroad man's wages in a 4-room house with no telephone. She gave them work and freedom and supper and a slap on the back of the head when they earned one, and she sent them out the door at sunup and trusted the day to bring them back. She had almost nothing, and her children had almost nothing, and what they had instead was each other, and the town, and the woods, and the certainty that they were known. Her grandchildren today have everything she could not give her own children: every safety device, every educational toy, every supplement, every screen, every scheduled hour. And her grandchildren are afraid of the dark, afraid of strangers, afraid of failure, afraid of being alone for 10 minutes. The grandmother knew something her grandchildren's parents had forgotten. A child who is trusted becomes a person who can trust. A child who is given freedom becomes a person who can use it. A child who has had almost nothing and has been loved through it becomes an adult who is not afraid of the world. We have given our children everything, and we have taken from them the one thing they actually needed: the dignity of being treated as people who could handle their own lives. Pick one thing on this list this week, just one, the one your own parents would have let you do that you have not let your own children or grandchildren do. The bicycle ride to the corner store, the afternoon alone in the backyard, the kitchen task with a real knife, the walk to a friend's house without a phone. Let them do it. Stand at the window and let them go. They will come back, changed in a way you will recognize, because you remember that change. You felt it yourself 60 years ago when your own mother stood at her own window and let you go. That is the inheritance. That is what is still possible to pass down. And if you found something worth keeping in this video, subscribe so the next one finds you when it is ready. Share it with someone who would have understood it: your sister, your brother, the cousin who still remembers the creek behind the farm, the friend from church who raised her children the old way. And in the comments, leave the one thing your parents let you do that no child today would be allowed to do. Where you are from, what year, just a sentence. That is how these stories survive. One sentence at a time, written by the last people who lived them. That is how they did it. That is what we are losing. That is what we can still take back.